In this video, I'm going to go over why everyone in Canada should be absolutely freaked out with this new hate speech law. And before we get into it, we're going to dive into examples, the whole thing, what it means, why it's so ridiculous and dangerous. But let's just listen to one journalist and then Sean Fraser, our Minister of Justice, answer this question. It'll just be a few seconds, then we can dive right in. So let's just get a feel for what this guy is presenting. So he's the one sort of announcing this new idea. So check this out.
Equally, if a police officer walked into someone's house and found they had, swastikas all over their bedroom, would that be an offence?
If it's purely a private display, that would not necessarily mean that you're promoting hate. However, it's impossible to say with certainty in a hypothetical situation whether an individual has this specific motivation behind the display of hate symbols without having an opportunity to dig into the motivation that they may have.
Where is the line between an
Okay, so listen to that as just one terrible example and think about that. So she's saying if a police officer walks into somebody's bedroom in their house and they have swastikas. Now, again, I didn't say this yet, but I don't have swastikas in the bedroom. I have no interest in swastikas or any of this. But basically, she's saying, here's an example. What if they did have that in their bedroom at home? Would that be hate speech? Could that be a problem, even in their room with a symbol? And he's saying, not necessarily, but you know what? It depends. Who knows what their motivations are? And then who do you think gets to choose their motivations? I mean, this is unbelievable. So he's leaving the door open to the idea of it being a criminal offense. And this isn't like a parking ticket of like $50. This is you go to jail for this kind of thing. Okay. Having symbols that people don't like in your bedroom, it's possible. So that just gives you a little bit of a framework for what we're dealing with. Just going to quickly look at this Government of Canada's website and just get some quotes here. So they're saying they want to make it a crime. And again, you go to jail for this for up to 10, 14 years, they're saying, depending on how serious it is, but it's a long time. Make it a crime to willfully promote hatred against an identifiable group by displaying certain terrorism or hate symbols in public. Okay. So willfully promote hatred. I mean, it's so difficult to know what that is, and they will be the ones that get to decide that. So I made a little cartoon here just to give you an idea. Check this out. I want you to think about this because this is exactly what we're dealing with here. Now, when you go on the highway and drive, right, we get a speed limit that's on the left. So we're in Canada, so we get kilometers per hour. In the US, be like 60 miles an hour. So at least you know what the speed limit is. And the reason they put that there is if you drive at around that, or maybe even a little over, like up to 120, the police are not going to give you a ticket, but certainly not if you drive at 100 or lower. And then every car has, a speedometer, so it tells you how fast you're going. Imagine if the sign was like this. It said speeding is illegal. An example of that is 350 kilometers an hour. Okay, well, everyone can see that example would be speeding, and that's bad. But it gives you no indication of what isn't speeding. So with this kind of a sign, police could technically give you a ticket or be putting you in jail um, if you went 50 kilometers an hour or like 30 miles an hour because it doesn't say anything. They might think, well, you're just being too scared. But let's go into this a little bit more. ChatGPT would not make this T-shirt, but imagine if someone made it about a different group. Now, the reason I picked Antarctica, there's no indigenous people from Antarctica, so it's impossible to be racist against them. But what if someone wore this or they said this? People from Antarctica, or you can imagine substitute a different group, have bad BO, body odor. They stink. Okay. Now, if somebody said that or wore the shirt, now I would not wear that kind of a shirt, even if I thought that. I don't wear those types of things. But if somebody did, I'd like to know in my country, do you go to jail? I just like to know the rules, just like the speed limit. I want to know. Would you go to jail for that? Could you go to jail for that? Now substitute this for a different thing and substitute bad body odor for something else. Would you go to jail? I'd like a clear answer on that. So you can imagine some might think, well, I feel offended by that. So I don't feel safe in my community because people are like making fun of that. So like, would that count? And they won't say clearly. Um, so if you think about this kind of thing, it's just so absolutely ridiculous. Okay. Now I'm going to show you one more thing that I did with, I'm going to look at a recent chat that I had, cartoon speed limit t-shirt designs. Now watch this. I had this chat with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is pretty good with legal stuff. I'm not a legal expert, but this is ChatGPT is going to be a million times better than a typical person. Okay, so we've even done legal things for a different business, and it was pretty good. So let's look at how they're thinking through this new law. Now, I said, what if someone made a t-shirt? It doesn't have to be all t-shirts. I'm using that as an example, but it could be anything. Where they drew the Prophet Muhammad. You're not supposed to do that in the Muslim religion. I never do it. It's not my kind of thing to make fun of religions. But let's just say, just if you're going by the rules, what if somebody did that and they made a derogatory, image of it that was, sort of in bad taste, let's say? Would that be illegal and possibly punishable by going to jail in Canada? And they said, well, you're really on thin ice there, maybe. And then I said, what if someone did the same thing for Jesus? And it said, look at this. It said that there's a sharp contrast there. Let's walk it through. Okay. So Christians are still an identifiable thing, or still an identifiable group under Canadian law. So in theory, a derogatory cartoon of Jesus with idiot on there could be interpreted as targeting Christians, but the legal threshold with blah blah blah. Okay, if a cartoon crosses into vilification of Christians as a group, it could trigger the same thing. But here's the key: the practical enforcement reality. Look at this. Courts have said offense or mockery isn't enough, blah, 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 but this is a brand new thing. The main difference is social sensitivity. Criticism or parody of Christianity is more normalized, whereas depictions of Muhammad are much more likely to spark public complaints, police reports, or political controversy. So, real world comparison. A t shirt or cartoon mocking Jesus almost certainly would be seen as blasphemous, but not very unlikely to be prosecuted in Canada. A similar cartoon of Muhammad, much more likely to be perceived as targeting Muslims or a vulnerable group and treated as hate speech, so you go to jail. So think about that. If you're a Christian, the way that they would do it, that's what they're saying here is if you made this type of mocking thing about a religion that you didn't belong to. I'm not saying it's a good idea to go mock someone's religion. Again, this is just what would happen if. And ChatGPT is saying, legally they're similar, but in reality, the Christian one, because we've tolerated that in society, you can think like Family Guy jokes over the years. Like there's been so many jokes, and the Western culture has mainly been like, you know what? No matter if you're sensitive or not, the way they've thought about this is let's just get over it. You might think it's rude, you might think it's disgusting, but that's just the way it goes. But now they're saying, with these new minority groups, we're going to come down and throw you in jail because of sensitivity. Now, again, these are just examples, but they might even be less of a. What if you're just saying, the body odor thing is less of a targeting thing, but again, you don't know what they're going to say for that. So the question is, what are you allowed to say in Canada? And just like that second speed limit sign, it sounds like it's really up to the police. So you really have to go around just being polite to everybody all the time and not really saying true opinion. So this hate speech isn't really about the most insane blocking of people to go to their church, physically threatening violence, all this. No, it is saying it's up for debate, all the way include to symbols in your bedroom. and the police and the judges and the courts will decide to throw you in jail or not, and they're not going to really tell you. So you can just live in fear. Don't really give your opinion. If if you happen to have sort of opinions that some of them could get you in hot water, you better zip it unless you want to risk going to jail. That's what I think is very scary and very sad about this. So I hope more people understand this. I'd love to hear your comments, thoughts on the video. I would appreciate that, and we'll see you in the next one.